Do you realize that God uses space? He creates space to engage with his people. And I don't just mean space in our soul and space in our mind, but physical space. I'm Pastor Brian, and I'm talking about how Christians should be in the business of creating space to help people encounter God. I was watching a Right Now Media video last night, and it was about the upper room where the Last Supper was and where the disciples went back to wait for the Holy Spirit to do something as they're birthing out the church. And I learned that underneath the upper room was a synagogue, but that synagogue was oriented toward the resurrection, and there was Christian graffiti, and it's very possible that space was the very first New Testament church that James led there in Jerusalem. Really cool stuff. And it reminded me that God creates spaces. These spaces are kind of special. They're not sacred that we need to take pilgrimages to them, but they're spaces for him to act. The encounter with Moses at the burning bush, and God says, look, take off your shoes, you're on holy ground. As you watch them put together the tabernacle, as you watch them put together the temple, God doesn't just dwell in those places, but those are helpful places for us to recognize that he does the same thing in our soul, same thing in our mind, but also we see that Jesus preached in spaces like in a boat, on a hillside, in a synagogue, in homes. We see Peter working in spaces, in homes, in crowded market squares, in what would have been like the university in Mars Hill. These spaces, they create a way, in very different ways, in special ways, for us to encounter God. We do the same thing here in our living rooms, in coffee shops, here in the church building. We use the city, which I think is going to be transitioning to something else, to help us to have space online. And of course, we're always encouraging that spiritual formation, so God has a space for you in your life, in your morning reading, in your home, in your commute, whatever it is you're doing in your mind as you're learning. We, as Christians, have an opportunity in the building to create a space for our little church family to encounter God in special ways, specifically the children's ministry, our lobby, and hopefully some of the other areas around the building. In addition, this space will allow you to invite your community in to encounter and engage with God. And so here's what we're doing. If you want to help us work on creating a space, we're obviously going to need funds. You can support this ministry by going to our website and finding the way to give and selecting a properties option or sending a check or getting in touch with us. But also, if you're here at Redeeming Life, you have an opportunity to help create some space. We're going to need people to help us paint, but not just anybody. We kind of like they did with the temple. We want some skilled people. So if you're good with cutting a line with a brush, or you're good with a roller, or you're just good with putting in that kind of energy and time, and you don't end up getting paint all over carpet and everywhere else, come paint. If you're like me and you're not great at painting, there's plenty of other things we can do with cleanup and ripping up some carpet, and we're just doing a work. I cannot wait to show you the space we've created in the lobby that we believe will help us to invite people in to encounter God in special ways. We're hoping the space back here in the children's ministry will help kids to encounter Jesus in new and refreshing ways. So Christian, I want to encourage you, don't poo-poo the reality of those spaces. Jesus met people where they were at in spaces, and he brought them into other spaces, and we create spaces even beyond the space in us and in our thinking, but in physical spaces. So let this be an encouragement to you. Open up your living room if you can. Help create space for people to encounter Jesus in the circles in which you're running as you're sharing the gospel. Thanks for your time.